Welcome everyone to the Memorial Day Tribute episode 2019. A heartfelt thank you for joining us on this solemn day. This special episode of Heart of a Volunteer Veterans Podcast endeavors to take a trip back through time, capturing and preserving the essence of service from sea to shining sea, an imperfect representation of the patriotism, honor, and loyalty of men and women who answered the call to arms during a time of world conflict and change, knowing a full measure of themselves might be demanded. The Memorial Day tribute episode started with the discovery of a simple book, one we will discuss at length, its contents invoking emotions of pride and humility, all the while being moved to tears. From this commemoration book came a need, a want, to know how war affected the counties across this nation. The stat will be used to paint the clearest picture of our service members that we can. The brushstrokes will be broad and sweeping, encapsulating the entire nation, regardless of the area or the data taken. There will be numbers used, but total casualty numbers for most of the wars are not given. The profound nature in the passing of the last World War I veteran and the declining numbers of the World War II generation really brings all this home. Those numbers are dwindling. Today we pay respect to those service members who gave the ultimate sacrifice so far, far from home, and to the veterans that proudly carried the banner of freedom but are no longer with us. We start off with World War I. Now, if you notice, the intro music was Glenn Miller, Moonlight Serenade. I use that for a reason because it really brings three of the conflicts together. World War I, II, and the Korean War. We'll talk first briefly about World War I. We'll go into World War II, and then we'll jump into the commemoration book. And we'll talk a little bit more about World War I and World War II before we get into Korea. Now, World War I, 1914, 1918, 4.7 million U.S. service members, and 0 of them remaining today. We lost our last one in 2011. I read you some of these names and listen to just how familiar they are and how they could be anybody, anywhere in this great nation. Edwin Peter Allison, Walter T. McKinney, John Irvin Thompson, Grace Banker, Julia C. Stimson, Dr. Elsie Ingalls, Frank Woodruff Buckles. He was an Army corporal. He was the last U.S. World War I veteran. He was born February 1st, 1901, and he passed away February 27th, 2011. The World War I generation has expired. But they gave the generations coming after them the heart, the patriotism, the honor to serve, to fight for freedom. The reverberations and the waves sent through generations from World War I can still be felt today. When we move into World War II, 1941, 1945. Of course, you know, the war had already started in 1939, but we weren't in it until 7 December 1941, a date that will live in infamy. And we were pulled in. 16.1 million Americans served in World War II. Every September 30th, the government gives their report. And their report in 2018 was that there was approximately 496,777 World War II veterans remaining alive. And they gave a rate of loss of 348 per day. I have to tell you, people, that affects me greatly. This is my grandpa's cohort. And don't want to lose him. Got me where I am right now today. Not podcasting, but got me in uniform. Got me doing the right thing. Got me using my head, thinking. And continues to do it today. But we know this is going to happen. So we have to do what we can to preserve as much of them as we can. Now, when I talk about preservation, it's funny because in my hands, I have a piece of living history. This commemoration book was commissioned by the county, Clark County, Kansas, and published in 1958. Though 61 years old, it still displays the hallmark of the generations it represents. Meticulous attention to detail, and made to last. Made to last as long as the memories within it. It has a very solid, slightly glossy black textured cover. The binding is strong, and the cover's edges are worn with a slight roll inwards. The pulp products utilized are of old, mature hardwoods, whose very nature of standing straight and reaching for the sky emulates the backbones and spirits of the men and women enshrined upon each of its thick yellowing pages. I'm going to attempt, ladies and gentlemen, to read this dedication. I've read it over and over, I don't know how many times. Here we go. It is with humble appreciation that we dedicate this book to the fine American boys and girls of our community who fought in all the far corners of the globe to preserve the justice, freedom, and democracy that we Americans have so deeply cherished ever since those long days ago of 1776. Our boys and girls who were a part of a mighty tide of men and women whose banner of freedom was ever high on the masthead of victory. This war memorial book has been compiled and published in the hope that their single efforts may be justly and permanently commemorated. To the brave parents, wives, sweethearts, brothers and sisters, all who gallantly served with them in both the armed services and on the home front, do we pay you tribute. If, as you scan the pages, you are only slightly reminded of the importance of the liberty which is our heritage, then this book will have served its purpose well. I think I did all right. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a remarkable find. Talked to Chris Tucker, and he said that these things come in from time to time, and he's still amazed by them. If you're from a county and that county is your family's county for years and years and years, go down to the courthouse and try to find one of these. Look up your family members. start looking at what they've done. Be moved. Be moved. The record that's in this book, they've got a page here I'm looking at, Gold Star Men. In World War II, this county lost 17 of its young men in World War II. The county itself, for World War I and World War II, provided 589 men and women to the war. This county has taken special pride in one of their veterans and one of their service members, Seaman First Class Willard Henry Aldrich. The VFW post here in Ashland, Kansas, Clark County, VFW post 7770, is named after young Willard Henry Aldrich. He made Seaman First Class July 1st, 1941. He was stationed on USS Oklahoma, and on the morning of 7 December 1941, Seaman First Class Willard Henry Aldrich and 428 of his fellow Navy men and women and Marines perished on the attack of Pearl Harbor. Torpedoes slammed into the side of the USS Oklahoma while men continued to fight on the deck until it rolled and started to sink. From the information that I got, 32 men were saved when the hull was cut open by other Navy members to save them before it went under. These men and women came back from World War II, World War I, back to this county. And within this book, it gives what they came back and did. They came back as farmers, teachers, electricians, nurses, doctors, pharmacists, plumbers, bankers, carpenters. A lot of these men and women came back to what they had left behind after only been gone for 24, 44 months. Very short tours. It looks here as if young Willard has Francis Monroe Aldrich, William Aldrich, Russell. Names like Billy Anderson. Came back and became a farmer. Calvin D. Betchert. Spent 25 months. Navy man. Returned December 23rd, 1945. Became a farmer. Jerome Charles Berryman. Naval Reserve. James Berryman. George. Old book. Now, I will tell you, when I look at these pictures, the World War I pictures, they're not smiling. It must have been the fear taking the soul or something. No smiles. But the World War II, the guys are smiling. The ladies, very serious. Guys, smiling. Hubert James Domi. I like his smile. He looks like he's a fun guy to hang out with. John Vernon Fox. Navy man. Carpenter's mate, second class. Came back and went to college. Became a student. Henry Alonzo Ford Jr. Asiatic Pacific Area Medal with 8 stars. Coral Sea, Guadalcanal, Okinawa, Tokyo. Marquette Franks, Army, American Kingpin Medal, Victory Medal, Good Conduct Medal. Served 1 year, 10 months, 3 days. Go and find yourself one of these books, folks. These books are amazing. Be careful with them because they are fragile. But they are amazing. They'll even get down and give you the numbers of the war bonds and rationing that each community did. That's pretty cool to hear. Pretty cool to see. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's come on. We got some World War II veterans left. Let's get our arms around them. Let's show them some love. Talk to them. Get their stories. They're a dying breed, and they're the greatest generation. We can't lose that. We got to learn from it. All right, we move on into the Korean War. My grandfather's brother served in the Korean War. Private Charles Cryer. He made it back. He was banged up. He's passed away since. But from 1950, 1953, and if you look at that, Korean War started 5 years after World War II completed. And it's the first clash of the Cold War. So it's political. So look at the American people, still raw from World War II, 16.1 million men and women sent overseas to fight, having that fresh on their minds, fresh in their spirits, and then having the cloak and dagger Cold War going on where a lot of information was not given to them. You can understand the animosity of going and fighting. But 5.7 million American men and women went and served in Korea. 2.2 million of them still remain. On Wednesday and Thursday of this week, the podcast will be going up to the soldiers' home up at Fort Dodge. And we're going to be speaking with some of the veterans up there, if we can get them to talk, and sharing those conversations with you. But we have got to get their stories. We've got to show them the respect that they deserve. Because when they're gone, they're gone. And you're never going to have those memories. You're never going to have those words. You're never going to be able to connect the dots like you can now. Even at this age, their minds are sharp. I'm telling you, they're sharp. Talk to them. Talk to them. Talk to them. All right, for the Korean War, I selected Butler County, Pennsylvania. If you're from this county, I'm going to tell you, in 1950, the population of the county was 97,820 people. 320, excuse me. During the Korean War, that county lost 25 servicemen and women. The county also lost 336 servicemen and women from World War I through Vietnam. Once again, listen to these names. Robert Anderson, Burl Cole, Clarence Everts, Paul Jenkins, Dwayne Mortimer, Raymond Murphy, Earl Snow, just to name a few. Those names are familiar to me. I've heard all of them as last names. I've heard them all, almost all of them, as first names. These are veterans. These are Americans that died in the defense of freedom, given the last full measure of themselves. I don't have to tell you, folks, with 2.2 million left, and that number is probably much lower, done from September to September. Go meet up with these folks. Go talk to them. Get their stories. Show them some respect. Going from Korea Obviously, a political war. That went right into Vietnam. No one had the hunger for any of that stuff. But we were compelled to do it. I won't speak of it, of why. I don't know. I wasn't there. I was just a young dude. But 8.7 million military men and women served in Vietnam. As of last September, 7.3 million are still alive with us today. We've got to get our arms around the Vietnam veterans also. And I have to tell you, I have a special place, a special place for World War II veterans because of my grandpa and my uncles. But I have another special place that's completely different for the Vietnam veterans because they're the ones that I could see what the outcome would be. They were young enough then that I could relate to them much easier. They still had a little wildness to them. My grandpa was settled. He had kids. He had a curly-headed grandson he had to manage. So, I get it. But the stories that the Vietnam veterans told inspired me. This idea of something greater than yourself really took hold. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I had to be a part of it. And when I finally did, it was game over. I was there. So I have a special love and respect. And I don't like the feeling that they still have, they carry, and I'll do everything I can to try to help them out. We're going to be traveling down to Biloxi, Mississippi for the 82nd reunion in September. Getting a lot of stories. Just going to set up in a room during the whole thing and just crank them out. Hopefully we can get that done with and get some in there. 18 to 41% of a state's population served in Vietnam. 18 to 41%. Now, of the states, the lowest KIA count was Alaska with 57. And the highest was California with 5,572. I selected a county in Texas, Army Heavy County, Brazos County. They lost 16 veterans in Vietnam. I'll read you some of their names. And once again, just listen to the familiarness. Coast to Coast. Anthony Curry. Charles Hebron. Converse Lewis. Sammy Morton. Charles Thornton. And Albert Vasquez. I've had a soldier with every one of those last names. Now, the Vietnam veteran that handed me this service record, this commemoration book from Clark County, World War I to World War II, once again, an amazing book. I'll get some pictures up online for everybody. He told me of a story where of the 16 boys in his graduating class, 2 of them had electrician deferments. They worked for the electric system, the company. Another one couldn't pass the medical evaluation. And 13 joined the military. And 13 came back. Of those 13, he said roughly about 75% returned back here to the county, start families, start businesses, get jobs, and start working. And that's kind of the feel during those time periods, and even kind of now, because when you look at it, when they say that 18 miles is the distance that somebody on average lives from where they were born or where they grew up. Of course, you get out into the to the Midwest where towns are farther apart, that number actually increases. But it's the next town over, or 2 towns, is really what that equates to. But a lot of people come home. They come to what's familiar. So it's important to seek out those Vietnam veterans, talk to them. I know the Vietnam veterans here in Clark County, when I retired and came back home, once again, we come home. When I came home, they had been holding the VFW down for 20 years. You had the World War II veterans, they were still involved, but the Vietnam veterans had stood up and gave that generation before them a chance to relish in the VFW instead of trying to run it. And they took over. And they carried that torch. And when I got back, I took over as the commander. And then passed it on to a Desert Storm veteran. So these Vietnam veterans, they've done a lot with very little. And we need to give them everything we can. Our attention, the stage, the microphone, so they can tell their story. And so people can start to see that it's not them that was the issue. They're pure. They're pure of heart. Some of the things that happened during the war, those things happen. The mind can only handle so much. And people are different. Not everybody walks the line of ethics and morals. So with that, forget, nope. Keep these Vietnam veterans in your heart. Keep them in your prayers. Get your arms around them. Show them some love. They deserve it. I can tell you right now, they deserve it more than me. So get your arms around them. I'm going to speak briefly on the Gulf War and very briefly on OIF, OEF, War on Terror. Because, we're going to get our time. We're going to get our time. This podcast isn't going anywhere. My heart's still beating. I still got love for Gulf War members, Desert Storm, OEF, OIF. So we'll talk about them and then we'll close it down. 147 KIAs in the Gulf War. It says 382 total theater deaths. When we do the episode that really encapsulates this, which we will, we'll get those numbers down. We'll get them concrete, and we'll figure out how they were labeling all this stuff. From 1990 to 1991, 2.3 million served, 2.2 million still with us. Like the Vietnam generation, the Gulf War generation has a suicide problem also. I didn't speak about that in the Vietnam veteran part, but they do. We need to help them out. My own aunt served in Desert Storm, and I remember I was a sophomore, and I sat there and watched it on TV, and I was scared. I was scared to death for her, but I was still scared. And, but you know what? It's now they need us to be there for them. They need us to listen. They need us to understand that what they did was important, because some of them don't feel as if we do. If you're my age, going on 46, and you remember watching that on TV, you weren't in the service, it's mind-blowing. Complete darkness with just artillery rounds and rockets going all over the place. And, and seeing the destruction in the day, in the daytime. These veterans, they deserve our respect. And the 147 that we lost, they deserve our respect. They deserve to be commemorated in every way. Much like the Vietnam veterans, the Gulf War veterans their time is coming due, and we're going to continue to get their stories and get them out there. Hoping to get my aunt on here. She can tell hers. I'm going to mention some of the names because they need to be said. John T. Rivero, Armando Ariel, John E. Brown, Jesus Gonzalez, David E. Owens, Nathan White. From 2001, OIF, the Cost of War Project says that 7,008 have been killed during the War on Terror. I'm not even going to mess with the numbers. They're not done, I don't think. We're not going to worry about it. I'm a part of that, as are a lot of you that are listening. And because of that, it's raw to us. And it's going to take some time, much like these other generations, for us to fully come to grips with what we've done. But the one thing we do know is the men and women that we've lost. And it's heartbreaking in some cases, in all cases, but that they were fathers, mothers, husbands, and wives. You know, I never much cared about myself because I was just, whatever. But when I look around at my soldiers and I see the pictures in their helmets and up on their dashboards, that's what kept me in the game. Had to get those guys home. And when you lose one, it hurts. So, to my generation, ladies, guys, keep them in your hearts. Say their names. Everybody. From World War I to World War II, say their names. That's all we got. We've got our actions now with what we can do to remember them, to honor them, to continue to move forward as they would. Curtis D. Feinstein, Richwell Doria, Frank Walkup, Ian Williams, Robert Danevsky. Memorial Day, 2019.